What a beautiful morning it is in Las Vegas today. I am very excited for our 29th annual Outlook here at the Center for Business and Economic Research. Again, we've been doing this for 29 years. We've also been around for 48 years serving the community. And I want to make sure that we acknowledge, the work that goes into putting on this event. Our students, our colleagues at the center, our colleagues at the Lee Business School at UNLV make this happen and have been doing this for 29 straight years, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. So if we could all give them a round of applause for putting on, please. Thank you. I want to also get some housekeeping done here. So we have some elected officials and public officials in the room. So we have Tom Burns from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We have Las Vegas City Councilman Brian Knutson. We have Senators Roberta Lang and Scott Hammond, as well as former Senator Joyce Woodhouse. We have Irene Bustamante Adams from the Clark County School District. And we also have Hector from Senator Catherine Cortez Masto's office. Can we all give them a round of applause? Thank you for your public service. Thank you for your service to our community. I also want to make sure I acknowledge our sponsors. So because of your support, the center has continued to be able to provide economic research on behalf of Las Vegas. We do this as a public service, but that is not possible. Hopefully, something happened. Well, Matt, there we go. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. So anyway, I want to acknowledge our sponsors because without you, we would not be able to provide real economic research that is important for the community. And this isn't just for us. This is for the community. This is for our students, right? We're putting them in real-world research that is impacting the community, but also giving them real experience so that they can go into the job market, be ready to serve this community and give back and use economic tools to make that happen. So thank you to all our sponsors today. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you. Yeah. So to get started, I'm going to welcome to the stage the Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Mr. Tom Burns. Please come up and say a few words. Thank you for being here.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. A lot of friends in the room. Nice to see you. Hope this year is treating you well. Economic development in the state of Nevada is not possible without partnerships like the ones we have with CBER. They provide critical data, critical information to our efforts to diversify the economy of the state of Nevada, and we are really grateful for this partnership. I think getting together like this, congratulations to you, by the way, because for the people who are here, it is about wanting to know what's going on in your hometown, about caring about what's going on in your hometown, about acting on what's going on in your hometown. And so this is a place where movement starts and leadership starts. And there's an awful lot to learn here. You have robust speakers here today that are going to impart a lot of knowledge onto you. So I'm glad you're here and a lot going on. I will say one of the best things about these are the best pens. Among the swag you get at things, this is pretty good stuff. So if you're missing your pen in about 5 minutes, don't come see me. But anyway, again, I want to thank CBER, Andrew and his crew and the students that put this on for their effort, their contribution to the community and to our education, because it's pretty invaluable stuff that we're about to hear. And with that, enjoy the presentation. Take care.
I'd now like to welcome Provost Chris Heavey to come say a few words. Provost?
All right, thank you, Andrew, and good morning, everybody. Absolutely delighted to be here just to say a few words of welcome on behalf of President Whitfield and myself. These are the kind of events that we are so proud to be hosting here at UNLV. So the President and I talk about UNLV as an urban serving research university, and we mean the serving part. And so this is exactly the space that we want the university to be in. Obviously, we care deeply about educating the next generation of our students, so we have a well-educated citizenry and workforce to go out and serve this great state and this community. But we really also want to share the expertise that exists at an R1 research university like UNLV. And I've been around for 30 years, and so one of the things I think I can say that you're all going to agree with is UNLV is one of the most dynamic cities in the nation. I'm so proud to be here at UNLV, and this room really just highlights what UNLV is about, because you can go out and look at a view like no one else in the world gets to see. And since the last time we were here, we got to add our beautiful sphere, right? Seeing that exciting thing out the corner of our eye this morning shows what an incredibly dynamic environment Las Vegas is. And so for a dynamic environment, we need data to understand how to move forward effectively. And so really proud of the work that CBER does, and want to thank them and congratulate them for being one of the great sources of economic data, so that you all, in trying to navigate the future of this great city, can be well informed and make good decisions. Because as people who track the success of businesses over decades, we know when businesses make really bad decisions, they don't understand the data, things can go terribly wrong. So thanks to Andrew for leading this great event. Andrew's been with us now for 2.5 years, and he's made CBER one of the leading economic research institutes in the nation. And so we're so proud of the work that he's done, and so thankful to have him leading CBER. And I just also want to say to you that they don't just do this event. Hopefully you're aware of their Brews and Views, and so we ask you to invite a friend and come out to one of their quarterly Brews and Views and some of their other events. They also have a great newsletter that you can sign up for to get their updates. And they do work broadly across economic diversification, transportation, healthcare, infrastructure, sports, and someone said turtles? I'm not really sure what that's about, but Andrew can tell you that story about turtles. So thank you for being here today. We're proud to host this event. Congratulations and thanks to CBER for being such a guiding force in providing useful economic data to our state, and I'm looking forward to the program. Thank you very much.
I also want to acknowledge we also have Regent Heather Brown here. Thank you, Regent, for being here. Yes. So raise your hand if you were here in the spring for our spring outlook. All right, I want to see next time all hands out, but I love how many of you are here again in the fall. If you remember from the spring, there was, a lot going on, as there is today. And if you remember kind of the take from that, right, is that there was a lot of uncertainty still happening today. And but a lot of has changed too in the economy. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to, of course, get into what's going on in labor force, what's going on, is there going to be a recession, is there not going to be a recession, our forecasts. We're also here to talk about urban cities and transportation and infrastructure, right? And we're going to talk about why that's important. But also just to talk about what CBER's been up to really quickly to get this kicked off. For the last 6 months, we haven't been just sitting around waiting and planning this, though this is certainly one of the highlights. We've also done 29 press interviews. We've done 15 public talks. We've released a white paper on sports. We've had 11 public school teachers complete our economic micro-credential, right? We've done 2 Brews and Economic Views. Raise your hand if you came to our Brews and Views this year. Love it. I want to see more of those hands up next time. But we're going to release the schedule here shortly. But we did one on hydrogen just in the last 6 months, and we did one on financial technology. We've done 4 projects, sponsored projects worth $400,000, and we've also helped and assisted in federal grants worth $415 million for the community. So we do put on Outlook, but we do all these other things, and this is just in 6 months, right? I also got married. Can we get, hey, look at that. And my beautiful wife is here, the most extraordinary person, Lisa. Let's give her a round of applause, right? Yes. We got married in the last 6 months, but we've been together for 9 years, and it's really made me think about something here that it is relevant to getting married and being with a partner that you love and that you grow together, but it also makes you think about other things like leadership and economic development, and that's commitment. Why does commitment matter? It's because commitment doesn't happen in a day. It happens over time, day in and day out, that you are committed to that person, to that idea, to your people, and in making improvements, doing a better job. There isn't a moment that I woke up and was like, I love my wife. There was moments, day in and day out, that I was like, I love my wife. It's the same thing for economic development in Southern Nevada, right? It's that we are pledging to this idea that we can grow, we can have economic growth and diversification and diversity. And we know that at CBER. It's part of our DNA. This is Las Vegas in 1975, back when we were started. And here we are today as the entertainment capital and the sports capital of the world. Clearly something happened, but it took commitment. And it was just, again, someone decades ago came up with these ideas, and we know this is true because we can see it right out the window, that someone came up with this idea. Gaming didn't just naturally happen. There were leaders. It's the same thing, when we talk about why is Las Vegas now the world's most best city for conserving water. It didn't happen with one thing. It happened over time. And I'm proud to say that CBER has played a role in this because we've been doing the population forecast since 1997, so 26 years. And yes, we're forecasting another 646,000 people in the next 18 years for a total of 3 million people. My point here, though, is we're talking about it now. And we're having those conversations and working with the water authority so that they can do what they need to do to continue to make sure our taps stay on as we grow. But someone clearly 30 years ago, 40 years ago, started making these decisions and started saying, we're going to make a commitment here to the community to make sure that we use this resource wisely. There's other things like sports. Remember, the leagues didn't even want to talk to us a decade ago or 2 decades ago. Now I can't even turn on a game without seeing an advertisement from one of our MGM or Caesars or Wynn or one of our leading gaming industries, right? Because there was a commitment years ago that we're going to work on this. And maybe they'll turn us away today, but if we keep chipping away at it, we keep talking to them, keep working with them, we can make this happen. And look at where we are. We're now this sports capital. We have football, we have basketball, we have baseball coming, we have hockey, right? And I'm proud to say that CBER has also played a role in that, even if it's a little role, right? We released a white paper this year on the sports economy. Why? Because we're committed to seeing this work. But we're not just talking about leisure and hospitality. We're talking about the things that are going on in our school districts in terms of youth participation. We're talking about the new jobs that are being created and the new businesses that are created that are beyond just the Strip. But we're also talking about, we're willing to say things that may not always be liked, such as there is also unequal access to sport in Southern Nevada, it seems to appear from the research. But we put that out there for the public to use and use to their benefit and to help with those decisions because we're committed to seeing the community succeed. We've also in the last 6 months worked on something around labor force. Why did we go from 20th in the nation to 32nd in labor force participation? What happened to 53,000 workers that we should have in our workforce right now? We don't. And so is it age? Is it retirements? Was it migration patterns? Was it education? Was it the workforce mix? We spent months working on this because we're committed to making sure that our economy has access for everyone and that our workers continue to succeed. And this is important for employers who have been struggling to hire workers right now. And so being able to kind of lend a hand in that conversation and provide that data has been very relevant to our mission to be committed to this community and continue to grow. And of course, with my friends at Brookings Mountain West, with Lindsay Institute, with Transportation Research Center, on behalf of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, we have also been working on infrastructure. How many of you think traffic sucks right now? Raise your hand, right? Imagine what's gonna happen, right, when we go from 40 million visitors to 50 million visitors and we have 73% increase in truck traffic. Because we're doing manufacturing, we're doing warehousing, we're doing logistics, we're bringing a major battery manufacturer, right? We need to have those conversations now about what infrastructure we need to be able to grow this economy so that we can have those opportunities, so that we have a more diversified economy that is stronger and can weather recessions. But it starts now in that commitment of what we're doing and having those conversations, and it will take time. We may not see the results in a year or 2 years or 3 years. But I guarantee if we start now, just like we did in sports, just like we did in gaming, just like we've done in mining, you will see those results in 5, 10, 15 years. And we won't be talking about it as we're talking about it today. Again, and then how many of you heard this concept of Roadmap 2040? Raise your hand. All right, we're going to work on getting more hands up in the future. We've been talking about this for last year. There's a concept of that we can diversify the economy. We can see it. The data is leading us there. We're letting the data guide us. And it's 2 areas. Very simple, 2 areas, healthcare and manufacturing. If we can focus on those 2, we can diversify the economy. But again, it's gonna take time. But if we make those investments in healthcare right now, let's say we work on the doctors and the nurses and the healthcare professionals and the admins and nurse practitioners, et cetera, we can go from 48th in the nation to the top 10. Again, it's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. We just have to remain committed to that idea and continuing every day to improve upon it. And once we do that, we can get into the really cool stuff, right? We can start doing biotechnology, medical lab space, we can bring in medical device manufacturing, and then we can get into other industries, right? It works together. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, but it does take commitment. Let me show you also one other example of commitment, and that's our students. We've gone from having 2 students when I started to 5, and our goal is to move up to 10 eventually, because our students are committed to economic research and using that to change our community. So let's see what it's like for them day-to-day life at CBER.
Hi, my name is Amanda Joy Lee, and I'm an undergraduate that works as a faculty assistant for CBER. I plan to graduate from UNLV in spring 2024 with a degree in economics and a minor in mathematics.
Hello, my name is Osiel Zamora, and I'm a recent graduate who's currently part of the CBER graduate program. I earned my degree from UNLV in spring 2023, where I majored in economics.
Hi, my name is Madison Motoyama, and I'm currently a faculty assistant for CBER, where I manage all of their social media and communications for the center. I'm currently a senior at UNLV, and I'm studying business marketing and plan to graduate in the spring of 2024.
My name is Zachary Allen. I graduated from UNLV in the fall of 2022 with a BA in economics. Since then, I've decided to further my education, and I am currently enrolled in the MS Applied Economics program.
Hi, I'm Alistair Dias. At CBER, I'm in charge of the Rebel Business Indicator newsletter every single week, and I also serve as a faculty assistant. I'm an undergraduate student studying economics with a dual minor in entrepreneurship and public policy. I'm in my 3rd year here at UNLV. I chose to work here because I felt like the concepts that I learned in class would be best applied to the fields of research and the greater economic outlook of the world.
While collaborating with CBER, I've gained valuable insights such as extracting data from multiple sources, organizing it in our spreadsheets, and creating monthly indexes that CBER publishes on their website.
I believe economics helps solve problems in the world by using data analysis to help influence our leaders to make decisions that will then change the world.
I like to subscribe to the ideal that most problems are man-made, and economics can help identify those problems, connecting the underlying problems to the possible solutions.
I've been able to gain experience managing and promoting content on several social media accounts that help me with marketing. In addition to that, I've learned a lot more, and I've become more aware and educated about Southern Nevada's current economy.
My time at CBER has been invaluable, providing me with the chance to work on real-world economic issues and the ability to collaborate with experienced economists and professionals in this field.
When I think of economics, I find it very similar to physics in the sense that it connects all fields of business as physics would with science. One common issue all businesses face is scarcity, and applying economics to the decision-making process will allow businesses to be more efficient and socially responsible in the long run.
Things I've learned from CBER are that I've improved my art coding, my Qualtrics skills, and ArcGIS.
I chose UNLV to advance my education because of the connections I was able to make as an undergrad, along with the amazing opportunities such as this one I have been able to be a part of.
Give a round of applause to all our students. Our very own Madison Motoyama made this video, so thank you, Madison. Great job. So why are we talking about cities today? Why is that the theme? And I could certainly tell you that 76% of our GDP is generated out of urban areas and cities. I could tell you that 85% of our population just in Nevada lives in an urban area or a city. But there's a little bit more to the story than that. There's this concept called agency. And what I mean by that is that cities are, and some will argue this, are our greatest invention because they allow human beings to have the agency to make decisions for themselves, to live to their highest and fullest potential, to be able to also raise their children in a safe environment and in a learning environment. And there's this interaction, right, of ideas that happen in cities. There's, of course, commerce that happens in cities. There's also entertainment that happens in cities. It is truly a place where human beings come together, right, and they can lead a better life. There's a reason why we live longer, 2-3 times longer than we did say 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And that's because we improved cities, we improved the quality of life of those cities, and therefore they've allowed us to grow on an economic scale and in health and in education and in new businesses, etc. That being said, COVID and the pandemic changed things a bit. How many of you right now are able to work from home? Raise your hand if you want 1 day a week. And yet, how many of you probably in this past week, or you're already here, but this question kind of answers itself, but how many of you have left the house in the past week? I think the pandemic taught us that certainly we like the flexibility, but we don't want to be stuck at home either. And so that's changed the dynamics of how we value cities in our urban areas. And they're important because, yes, they drive GDP, but they're also important because they are a place that human beings are able to have this agency to live out their best selves. But we do need to change how we think and view and use our cities. If more of us are working from home, and in Vegas that's an interesting story because we also rely on industries that require face-to-face interaction. 29% of our GDP just comes from leisure and hospitality. At the same time, and that has helped, right? I mean, the fact is, you can see, so this is from the Downtown Recovery Index, which Dr. Chapple is going to talk about here in a minute, but Vegas is number 1 in terms of the amount of pedestrians returning to our downtown areas. A lot of that is probably driven by leisure and hospitality, so that has been good for us. At the same time, there's probably underlying things underneath that we're facing just like other cities. And that's why it's really important that we have this discussion of what's changed, what are some of the challenges out there that we need to better understand that this might be masking, and what are also the opportunities so that we can continue to grow and come out of this pandemic stronger, our cities more resilient, our economic activity also more resilient to the things that happen in the global economy. But that takes having these discussions and understanding what's going on. So I'm really excited. We brought all the way from the University of Toronto. I reached out to her back in January, and she emailed me a week later saying yes, which is, I thank you. But I'm really excited that we have with us today Karen Chapple from the University of Toronto. She's also professor emeritus at Berkeley. She's written 3 books on cities and development and infrastructure. And I've asked her to come up and talk a little bit about her research, her work, but also about how this relates to Las Vegas and what can we learn, what can we do as a result of what other cities are doing and other challenges they're facing. So can you please welcome Dr. Karen Chapple to the stage. It's all yours.
Terrific. Thank you so much for the invitation, Andrew. You all are so lucky to have CBER. The UNLV's lucky. Las Vegas is lucky. Other cities are really jealous because you really need that quality of research and leadership in economic development to make your city thrive. So I'm going to talk about downtown recovery, and so Andrew actually just gave away my punchline. You know, Las Vegas is number 1, but there are long-term concerns about its resilience. So let me provide the evidence that will make Andrew's case. Cities have always grown and then faced disasters and come back, right? And I call this the death and life of American downtowns. And whether it's fire or pandemic or other natural disasters, cities come back. Cities, rise up in the beginning of the 20th century due to the invention of the steel frame skyscraper and also the transit systems that got lots of people downtown to work, and so you had these new office districts that emerged and became kind of the landmark for central business districts in North America. And you don't see this, by the way, in other cities around the world in the same way, and it's because of when transit developed and so forth. Cities have had many disasters recently in the 20th century. Highways arguably were a disaster for some cities in the 1950s. The smart cities like New York tore down the highways and allowed more residential development downtown, and arguably that's the only reason New York has come back as much as it has. Other cities are still kind of dealing with the repercussions of having so much land dedicated to infrastructure and highways. And remember, when you build new highways, it just means you get more cars and more congestion. Traffic engineers have proved that over and over. So not the optimal way to run cities. So Europe spared its cities from that by building peripheral roads, but that's a whole other story. I'm going to come back to Europe in my rankings in a moment. So this is what downtowns looked like 3 years ago, if you remember this moment, 3.5 years ago now. We decided to study it using mobile phone location data. So really what we're looking at is the stops of anybody with a mobile phone that has their location services turned on. And we have about 18 million data points across North America. And so this is from employees, this is from visitors, it's from shoppers, and it's from residents. You can be out walking your dog and you'll get counted. You can't be driving through, you have to stop, and then we'll count you as being part of the activity. So it's a great way to measure comebacks. This is what it looks like in Toronto, where I'm living now. Every dot is a piece of activity on a particular day. Just to give you a sense of how this measures pandemic impacts, this is Toronto before the pandemic. The red is phone activity in the downtown financial district. The yellow is phone activity everywhere else in the city. So this is before pandemic. Pandemic hits, boom, downtown is dead. And then the comeback starts the next year, and downtown comes back a little bit. But what should be noticeable here is originally downtown was very dominant. Pandemic hits, and then suddenly the yellow is growing, so a lot of the neighborhood commercial districts are doing much better. And we're seeing this in city after city after city, that the neighborhood districts, the employment subcenters in the exurbs of the city, those are doing actually better than our traditional downtowns at this point. So we define downtowns based on employment densities. We figure out where the highest employment densities are, and we draw a polygon around that. If you're a geek, a data geek, this is how you do it at home. And so this is what how the downtown definitions vary. On the left is a zip code-based definition of Las Vegas downtown. On the right is the Brookings definition, which my brilliant colleague at Brookings, Tracy Ann Lowe, uses. Here's our definition of downtown Los Angeles. So you can see we capture the traditional downtown up in the north, and then a little bit, we go down the strip a little bit because of the job densities there. We consider it part of downtown. So this is our website, downtownrecovery.com. At the beginning of the pandemic, I bought this URL for $3. Nobody else seemed to want it. And it's now worth $2,000. So way to get a college education fund for your kid. Andrew, you might want to think about that. Rankings. So that we've already seen the rankings and how Las Vegas is on top. So these are color-coded by region, and it's worth noting that the Southwest is in yellow, so it's really the strongest region. So it's not really just Las Vegas. It's Phoenix. It's part of Texas. It's San Diego. It's a set of areas that have really bounced back quicker than anything else, partly because of the weather, partly because of tourism, and I'll talk about that in a second. So this is just to compare to Europe. So these yellow bars here, these are European cities, and they're still bouncing back much quicker than anything on this continent. So Barcelona, Paris, Madrid, Berlin, doubling in their activity since before the pandemic. Why? Because there's a huge amount of latent demand for tourism, and the European downtowns focus on culture and historic landmarks and traditional community places, and that makes for a very vibrant downtown, and it's a lesson that I think North American downtowns need to learn. And by the way, we can now look building by building, so we're doing this for some cities. We're telling them building by building, block by block, where there's activity and where it's dead, and you really should think about conversion. So we did some models to figure out why some downtowns are coming back. We have a whole bunch of factors that we throw into the models, from built environment to density to socioeconomic variables. And let me just go through a couple of these, and you can see how these correlations work. So if you look at the correlation of downtown recovery with professional jobs, so it turns out that's negative. And in fact, concentration in professional sectors turns out to be the very worst thing you can do for your downtown. So that's having a lot of lawyers, accountants, management consulting firms, and so forth. Those are the folks that are working at home more than any others. And that's why the cities that were over-specialized in professional jobs, and I'm talking San Francisco, Seattle, New York, York, Boston, they're still suffering from that. Guess where Las Vegas is? Very low in professional jobs. So, hey, you lucked out, right? You didn't have a big legal sector that was located downtown. Of course, you have some, but you don't have nearly as much as the rest of North America does. Another correlation, finance and insurance. Again, underrepresented in Las Vegas. You're way to the left here. Really a weakness now in downtowns because of the rise of remote work. Here's where Las Vegas wins. So you're strong, you come back faster if you have good hotels and food services. Well, guess what? Las Vegas is doing really well there. So another correlation is with population density. So actually people are avoiding denser downtowns, and Las Vegas is relatively low density, and that's helped it as well. Commuting by car. So cities that are coming back faster are reliant on cars, unfortunately, for some transit systems. So Las Vegas, again, everybody here has many, many cars, apparently. I just learned that this morning in the traffic. And so that's one of the reasons that you're coming back. Average commute time. So here you're about in the middle of the pack. You don't have the really short commute times, but you don't have long ones either. If you have long commute times, people are working at home in regions with long commute times, and so that's slowing the downtown comeback. So when we looked at some factors, we ran a random forest regression model to figure out what were the factors driving recovery. Here's a little zoom in here. You can see a little bit better. So again, the top variable here in red, negative impact, that's professional jobs. And then commute time is next, multifamily buildings are next, employment density, finance, insurance, information, and so forth are all slowing your recovery. So it's really about the economy. It's also a little bit about transit. So we've been looking recently at transit and relating it to downtown. In general, the cities that are coming back are also seeing a bounce back in their transit systems. Overall, transit ridership is back about 70%. Bus service is a strength, and that's what you see in Las Vegas. And in fact, it's all over North America that people, when they came back on buses, and that's really because essential workers use buses. So we've seen a really surge in bus ridership. Light rail actually has not done as well. I understand you're thinking about a light rail system. Have to think about it in light of our new kind of work from home patterns. So, policy implications. Over the short term, what should we be doing? Well, first of all, we need to keep our downtowns alive. We need to make sure we have activity there, and whether that's having events or whether it's putting tenants in vacant storefronts, pop-ups, art exhibits. How about using some office space for entrepreneurship and incubators? Cities are doing all sorts of interesting things. Many are moving student activities downtown. Students are a great way to revitalize your downtown. Then we'll also need to kind of keep the businesses there before they go out. We have a lot of businesses struggling right now since the end of the PPP. Events. So you guys are like the masters of this. So I can't tell you anything about events that you don't know already. It's fabulous what you do here. I'm sorry about F1 destroying your traffic, but maybe it'll be worth it. I hope it is. The Super Bowl, again, figure out how you can capitalize from that. A lot of people are thinking about Taylor Swift. The Taylor tax, need to enact the Taylor tax as swiftly as possible. So figure out how you can capitalize. Did she come here already? Did I miss the boat? Okay, well, when she comes back. And then again, we really need to understand that hybrid is and remote work from home are here to stay, and not kind of wait for people to see the light and want to come back to work. Lives are just too complicated. In the long term, there's a lot of work to be done to diversify economies, and this is both downtown and in the region. And this is where, again, the long-term resilience of Las Vegas comes into question, because, Las Vegas, recession after recession, Las Vegas is at the bottom, right? You hurt more than any other city. in North America. So you don't want to have that hurt. I mean, I think of 2008 when we were, the foreclosure crisis, and then the pandemic. And so being ready for next time, I think, should be very high on the agenda for you guys working with CBER and UNLV. So diversifying land uses is really important. I was looking at what your governor's doing. This is his list of new sectors that he'd like to see in Nevada. I think it's a great list. I think the idea of healthcare and manufacturing is really, really, really good because those are sustaining economies everywhere around the world. They're proven sectors. I think also you need to think about what economic geographers call related variety, which is the idea that you have a niche. You have a niche in entertainment. So building out your diversity around that niche is really important. So when you're doing tech, don't try to do AI competing with San Francisco. Do AI in entertainment. Do AI in sports tech, right? And make these synergies work across the different sectors. That's how a really strong diversity will work. It's based on your specialization, but it's diversifying out of that into different types of jobs. And then taxes, again, as a Californian, people always say all the businesses are leaving California for Nevada and Florida and Texas. It's actually not true. What people go is they establish a little, a post office in Florida to get the lower taxes, and they're still running their businesses in California because they want to be near the talent. So low taxes are good, but they are not a deciding factor. When I've looked at business relocation from California, which I've done some studies on, manufacturing is the best bet to get. So you guys should target California manufacturing and get them because they're sick of California and the environmental regulations, and so they'll come to you, especially if you let them pollute. So there's certain sectors it will work with. It won't work with all. Low taxes is not enough. Building conversion. This is really, really important. I was looking at your vacancy rate. You have a commercial office vacancy rate of 15%. That's not good, and those rates are still going up. Commercial leases are typically 10-year leases. We've only seen 40% of the leases come up since the end of the pandemic, so there's another 60% to go. Those are all going to go, and those are people largely pulling out of Class B and C buildings. Also, by the way, WeWork, which went into bankruptcy yesterday, is overly concentrated in Class B and C buildings. Those are the buildings you really need to work on, target, look at them carefully, see what you can do to convert them soon, and maybe to residential, but maybe also to nonprofit or educational other types of uses. Inclusive and affordable, so one way to get people downtown is to have affordable housing there. That's a great way to get students there, by the way, and students, again, are 24/7 activity that we really need downtown. Education, so double down on your education. Wouldn't it be great if UNLV, became like the UC system? Wouldn't it be great if you had a great network of public universities here that are sort of a way for people to move up in the world. UNLV is a fabulous asset. You need to build it out. You need to support it. It needs to grow. And then building off of that into workforce development and micro-entrepreneurship, because in the end, with one of the highest unemployment rates of any city, you're going to need to get some skills improved. And finally, transit and walkability is going to be really key for making downtowns come back. Not everybody wants a suburban environment. Not everybody wants a dense walkable environment. But guess what? There's a lot of people that want both, or either one. All right. So you have that demand. I think it's time to really double down on walkability and make some places. And then that's actually how you'll get the Californians here, the ones from San Francisco or the Seattle folks. Well, they want to see that walkability, and so it is worth investing in the long run, especially as we decarbonize our cities. Oh, and there is one last point. Please, the A's. You don't need the Oakland Athletics. I just wanted to put a little pitch in it. Oakland needs them a little bit more than you guys do. They will help, though. They will help. They're a great economic development generator, especially, by the way, we know this from all the stadium studies, you have to have a lot of activities around them to get the spillover activity to make it pay off for Las Vegas. So tactical urbanism is not enough. Got to really think about rebuilding your entire city. This is San Diego, which is one of our top comeback cities, and resilient too. So thought about its diversity of downtown, put a lot of residential, and started 30 years ago, and it's really paid off. And Jane Jacobs told us this many years ago, downtown is for people. So thank you very much. That's our $3 website if you want to go.
We're going to do a little Q&A. Yeah. So Dr. Chapple, you've been studying development, growth in large and small urban communities for decades. So in what we're going through right now, with economic vitality and after the pandemic, do cities and downtowns still matter? Or is it, we should all be hermits and work from home, and that's the way the world is now?
Yeah, no, I think you need to have a vibrant urban core. The donut hole thing, that urban form that Detroit is known for, the donut hole where all the investment happens around it, that's not sustainable. It won't sustain transit. It won't attract talent. It's bad for the environment, it's bad for the equity, and again, it's bad for the economy because you need all parts of the region working together in order to thrive. So I do think we should double down on downtowns. I think there, in Las Vegas we have huge potential right in the Southwest. There's development, there's talk of tech parks and so forth. With some caution, because a lot of tech firms, we saw this in San Francisco, it was a major lesson from San Francisco. They were in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley was suburban and incredibly congested, and the workers wanted to be in San Francisco. So first you had them move to San Francisco and try and commute to Silicon Valley via the train or by car. It was too hard. So then the firms, Google, Salesforce, everybody bought their real estate downtown. So I think it's a lesson that for talent, you really need those downtowns.
And you showed us, right, that Vegas is at over 100%, right, in recovery of our pedestrian traffic, at least for our downtown. I mean, what does that say about Vegas, or what does that say about the rest of the country in terms of their downtowns?
Yeah, well, everybo's jealous of you, which is great. It's a good place to be on top. There's a number of you have a number of cities that are in a similar position, and a lot, for better or worse, have benefited from almost like serendipity, right? So you have places like Salt Lake City, which just happened to open up a lot of new apartment buildings downtown at the beginning of the pandemic. So suddenly they had a lot more people. So you have a lot of being in 100% places. There's a lot of luck involved. It's the same thing with being a student and getting that A+. It takes some talent, but there's a lot of luck. And so then there's a question of, in the long run, like if we took our rankings and projected them 10 years out, who's going to be on top? Who are the most resilient places? Well, we've sort of seen this over time, that it's been the most diverse regions that have really, really been able to thrive over time. And this is what we call the superstar cities, the New Yorks and Londons of the world. So it's important to make sure your fundamentals are in place and you're not just benefiting from dumb luck. People really being pent up at home for 3 years and then really wanting to come out and gamble.
Well, and look, so we've seen leisure and hospitality recover incredibly well after the pandemic. Certainly, we're going to talk about a little later about how sensitive we are to the next recession. So, kind of reinforce what you were saying earlier. What else do we need to do if there is a recession? Like, what are the things that we need to do to continue to strengthen our downtown here in Vegas?
So I don't think there will be a recession, but there's definitely some worrying indicators for Las Vegas, and I would be really interested to think about, UNLV grads and then the pipeline into the workforce and entrepreneurship pipelines. And are we stimulating those? Are we giving people space? Like maybe that's again that incubator idea of putting space downtown for young creatives so they don't pick up and move to Seattle, right? So you don't want to lose them. And so maybe also it's loan programs and other ways to fortify startups. And then thinking strategically about what those startups should be. Because again, you have these incredible assets in terms of entertainment and now the sphere, right? And so how can you leverage, that to build out a new kind of tech or sports? I think the sports economy is incredible. There's no other city, right, that can compete with the 17 stadiums that you have. The potential is so tremendous, and then linking it across sectors. That's a niche that nobody else has. You just don't see that in Boston or Phoenix or Miami, right? You guys got it.
And so when I was looking through the downtown recovery, I noticed on the correlations, right, you mentioned the leisure and hospitality, but I also noticed some relationships in terms of the transportation. I think you mentioned that along commute times, as well as housing. Even political leanings showed a correlation. Can you talk a little bit about more of those? I'm not necessarily suggesting causation, but just the interesting correlations on how some cities have fared better than others in respect to some of these variables.
Yeah, it turned out that that the blue cities came back slower. The bluer the city, the more democratic, and I think it was partly because the stronger the lockdown controls and the more mask regulations and so forth. And so we saw that early in our data. We pulled out Texas, and it was just mind-blowing how much faster it had come back than California. In the early days. I mean, San Diego eventually has really boomed, and as have some of the Central Valley cities. So there is a relationship there. It's also, and Tracy Haddon-Lowe has probably pointed this out in her Brookings work too, that there's also a very strong relationship between those economies and high-end, high-tech, high-educated workers, right, that are choosing to work at home. And that's the latest kind of work benefit, is you get to work at home so you can, walk the dog and so forth, much easier. So that's why this is so hard to tease out. These are correlative factors, not necessarily causation, but they're all related.
And do you think with, especially large employers are starting to, maybe tighten up on those work from home policies? I mean, are we just talking about something that seems pretty short term? Or, I mean, you mentioned that you think work from home is here to stay. We've also seen, though, that businesses are at least asking them to come back a couple days a week. And there's been some really good research that shows when they're not in the office, they are losing out on things like mentorships and.
Oh yeah, it's critical for young people too. That's why I think this space, offering space for young people is really important, because that you need that peer learning in order to grow and advance in your career. So, no, I think there's pretty much a consensus that people do need to be together to be productive in most sectors. Maybe not customer service. You can probably do that from home, right? But in most sectors, to have those serendipitous conversations by the water cooler, you need to be together. You need to be together 2 or 3 days a week. Emily Badger wrote a great piece on this in the New York Times about a month ago about, the question is, how much do you need to be together to have those serendipitous moments and innovation? And maybe it's not that much. And then how do you fill the space if you only have people there 2 or 3 days? Because you want them there on the same day to have those conversations. But then what do you do with the empty space the other day? Bring in young people probably. But yeah, so that's I think that's really this is here to stay, particularly in tight labor markets. Now, Las Vegas is not as tight a labor market as Boston, right? So employers can probably lay down the law a little bit easier in Las Vegas, but ultimately workers are not going to be attracted. Talent is not going to be attracted to Las Vegas unless they also have the opportunity to work from home a couple days a week. It's just the new normal.
So a lot of time developers and planners and officials, they're balancing, and stakeholders too, are always balancing these two things of they need development and they need growth. I mean, do you think our mistakes get made? I mean, a lot of your research was on the Bay Area. what were mistakes made, you think, on balancing these two, or just like you even mentioned here, you're talking about Detroit and that donut hole. What are mistakes that we need to be aware of so we don't repeat them?
Yeah, it's funny because this is what I teach on day one of my economic development class for my grad students. What's the difference between development and growth? And you would be surprised how hard it is for people to get their heads around that growth is like a quantitative increase in output. It is measured in jobs. It's measured in revenue, whereas development is creating the capacity in order to create growth. So it's a chicken and egg thing, right? You really need to have the development if you're going to have the growth. If you have rapid job growth without development, without having talent, without having innovation, without having increases in productivity, then that rapid job growth doesn't mean anything. And eventually, when firms get too big, they'll start outsourcing, they'll move the workers to India, or they'll move to some other place. So you need to be sustainable. You need to have a development focus, and that means workforce development. It means an innovation focus, productivity focus.
So, in going back into your early work, or a lot of your experience working in the Bay Area, and as much as Nevadans don't like to get compared to people in California, because we have nightmares thinking about that sometimes, but at the same time, the reality is like San Francisco, for example, has some of the same land challenges that Southern Nevada does. Our land is 85% of the state land, at least, is controlled by the Bureau of Land Management. We have a fixed resource. Are there lessons learned, good or bad? Because in California, too, you have some of this fixed, especially in the Bay Area with the natural geography. Are there lessons there that we can take away and learn from on how do we develop with the scarcity, though, of land right now, which we're going to talk about later with Mr. John Restrepo when he comes up. But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, so California has really struggled to do infill development. It has land scarcity, it's geographic, but it's also, the green belts in Northern California that restrict where you can build. And the problem is that the state, not until very recently, didn't make it easy to build in infill. We made it really hard, and it's super easy to build out in the middle of nowhere. You just, especially if you have development charges that can impact fees that can pay for the infrastructure, and maybe you get some federal dollars to pay for the new infrastructure. But it's very hard to get that same funding to pay for building in the city, which is super hard to do. Assembling sites, getting a big enough site, rebuilding old infrastructure is expensive. So the state has to step in, and the region, the MPO, and the city to level the playing field as much as possible. And that's the one good thing that California has done. Whether you love or hate Gavin Newsom, I don't know whether you guys like him here, but and we don't necessarily like him that much either. We don't even like Kamala Harris, but that's a whole thing. We don't like our own politicians. We wanted Feinstein to go, but. So Newsom benefited from having a legislature that was majority Democratic and passed an amazing set of housing legislation that is forcing infill development. It's making it super easy for developers to build. If the city doesn't approve your development, guess what? You're going to get to build it anyway. If your city doesn't approve it in a timely fashion and so forth, and especially if you're building affordable housing. No impact fees, and you get to do it by right. So making it really easy for developers, I think, is super important for infill, and it's going to be very important for you guys with land constrictions.
So you and a colleague wrote a book called Transit-Oriented Development, or Displacement, or Community Dividends. So you talk about transit-oriented development, and it also, good for growth, but also may lead to higher rates of displacement and gentrification if not done correctly. We are having, I think we're going to be having a lot of conversations as we all sit in traffic, thinking about our infrastructure and our transportation system. So what are lessons there that we need to be keeping in mind as we invest in that, as well as making sure that creates opportunity for all and opportunities to grow at the same time? Yeah,
transit is the anchor of every major city. So, and if you guys have the aspirations that you were pointing out to and the growth, you're really going to have to invest in transit and make it possible for people to have choices about how they get around, so that you're not imprisoned in a car. If you talk to the folks in Bogota, for instance, a city which grew incredibly fast, and their big regret is they didn't put in the subway. It was a huge mistake, and the subway is what makes New York and Boston and Chicago still great cities, and able to house a lot of people in a small area. And transit is also key for economic development. We know this, the economic development impacts of transit. So you have to do it. I guess the question is how and what, and whether now we know maybe bus and bus rapid transit are actually more cost effective and flexible than some other rail. So thinking very carefully about what you invest in. That's going to be a great job for the RTC over the coming years.
Well, thank you, Dr. Chapple. Thank you for being here. Let's give her a round of applause. I'd like to welcome to the stage our moderator for our next panel and our panelists, Dr. Cecilia Maldonado.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. Good morning. Well, I have the privilege of moderating our panel. So I'd like to welcome Molly Kinder, who's a fellow with Brookings Metro. She's here from DC, right? So welcome. I'd like to welcome David Swallow, Deputy Chief Executive Officer with RTC. Morning. And Brian Knutson, who's the City Councilman for the City of Las Vegas. Awesome. Thank you for being here this morning. All right, my first question is for David. You've heard what Dr. Chapple had to say when it comes to transportation-oriented development and the connection with economic vibrancy. Do you agree that transit development is the economic development?
Absolutely. One of the things that we have to look at, as Dr. Chapple mentioned, transit is just fundamental to any city. In most cities that have evolved around the world, you will see a robust transit system that really evolved around people having to walk everywhere. Our community is pretty nascent relative to everybody else, so we evolved around the assumption everybody has access to a car, which they don't. And so we know that transit is fundamental to mobility for our community. Not only that, but providing a choice for some trips, maybe not all the trips. How many have ridden the Game Day Express to the Raiders or the Golden Knights? How you like it? Yeah? It's okay, huh? We get pretty good response from our customers. I think last week's game we saw about 3,000 people ride the Game Day Express to the game. When you look at transit today, our numbers, right now we're about 50 million passengers per year on our bus system. We're the 14th busiest bus system in the United States and the #1 most cost-efficient bus system in the United States, which is kind of a bragging point, but it also speaks to how little we invest in transit, but how well we do with what we get. And so I think when we look at our commuters, typically about 80% of the passengers on our buses are either going to work or going to get a job. The other 20% are using it for day-to-day life, whether they're going to the grocery store, the library, the doctor's office, what have you. We think transit is fundamental. I think when you get to transit-oriented development, that is next level evolution of our community, something that we've outlined in our Southern Nevada Strong Regional Policy Plan, looking at the potential for how we have this dispersed development pattern. We have a good central business district, right, of the Strip and downtown, but really the rest of the valley, the rest of the 2.3 million people where they're living, how do we develop urban centers that we can connect with high-capacity transit? And I think that's a real opportunity for us.
Absolutely, I agree. How do you measure that aspect of economic development? I know it's part of your policy.
Sure. So I think when we look at how many new housing units are coming in, how much commercial space is coming in. You know, we really have to partner with, you know, the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, the Global Governor's Office of Economic Development, the chambers, obviously the development community itself. How do we look at, you know, what do the numbers tell us? Unfortunately, right now, the numbers tell us most of the development is happening on the periphery of the valley versus happening in our urban core. And so that makes it really challenging to extend the services out there, the infrastructure to get to those, to provide the service that we need to. And so what can we do to change the dynamic? And I know that the city and the other city and county are looking at how to incentivize that infill development.
Great, thank you. Molly, what are urban communities doing at a national level to adjust or to adapt to changing work and consumer preferences that allow them to cope with less workers traveling to downtown communities?
Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you for having me in this conversation. It is such a pleasure to be here in Las Vegas. It's only my second time ever, and it's pretty remarkable to be here at this moment when you're preparing for such a huge event with Formula One. It's hard for me to imagine so many cars flying through these streets, but it shows, I think, that this is a place where big things can get done. I work at Brookings Metro, and thank you to Dr. Chapelle for mentioning several times my brilliant colleague, Tracy Haddon-Lowe. She's a colleague of mine at Brookings who's been really focused on this question of the future of downtowns. And she's been in conversations with cities across the country with these very same questions. What do cities, particularly those who've seen a lot of change in the patterns of commuting and coming to downtown or not, they've seen real or perceived rises in crime and potentially loss of tax revenue. What are some of the solutions? And Tracy and her team have found some really interesting solutions. Many were already discussed brilliantly in the last session, which is, of course, rethinking land use, thinking more about mixed use real estate, some conversions, thinking differently about how we're utilizing our downtown space, making downtowns more livable. But then I think some of the other solutions that have come up in her conversations across the country are less about those types of solutions and more about my world, which is in work. A lot of focus on workforce development and thinking creatively and innovatively about that. Entrepreneurship, how can we think differently about downtowns? The other thing I want to say, just to put in a slightly different perspective about whether or not it's a problem that so many workers, maybe not so much here in Las Vegas, but around the country, are doing more remote work. There's a positive in there that is often overlooked, and this comes out of some research that a colleague of mine at Brookings named Lauren Bauer, she's an economist who works in the Hamilton Project. She found that in the context of the headlines around the labor shortage that this country's been grappling with, interestingly, recently, the biggest group that is driving our labor force recovery in the country, the group that is going back to work in the highest numbers, is women, and particularly prime-age women with young children. In fact, she found that right now, women with young children have the highest labor force participation in history. And a huge part of that is because of remote work. And remote work has enabled women, I am one of them, I have 3 children. Remote work has enabled me to do my job. It allows me to be very ambitious and produce content, but when the doctor calls and I have to quickly pick up my child at school and bring him to the doctor's office, or there's an issue with something at school that I have to be there for, or all the disruptions that come with being a parent, it's much easier to manage those changes. It also sometimes makes childcare less expensive. Commuting is timely, takes time, it's expensive. Childcare costs here in Nevada are very expensive. In this region, childcare for an infant can be $1,300 a month. That's a lot of money. There are ways that telework is making women able to better juggle their job. But what's interesting in this is that really is a benefit that's primarily for educated women. It's not for women in lower wage jobs. It's not even as much for women of color. So this is really an opportunity with telework for more educated women to be able to work. And this matters here in Las Vegas. If you look at UNLV, predominantly the students today are women. They're outnumbering men in college campuses. Across the country, women just recently outnumbered across the whole workforce those with a college degree. Your human capital, the people who are getting a lot of your advanced degrees, they're women. A lot of them are going to have children. Remote work allows women to participate. So it also creates challenges that we're all grappling with, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are some positives as well.
That's a great point, especially given the recent research that we'll lose a lot of women in the labor force, especially those that have to work in those sectors where face-to-face is important. So the childcare issue is really important. So thanks for bringing that up. Brian, I'm going to go to you. Are there any ideas around strengthening downtowns and other urban centers that would bring benefits?
Yeah, and I appreciate being here, and it's for me, I can start the conversation with the work that Andrew actually started with me a couple of years ago. I think it is about diversifying who's in our downtown core. So at the City of Las Vegas, we have the Tech Innovation Center, so we're trying to build that entrepreneurial spirit and develop that opportunity for people to come downtown. Recently, we've started talking about expanding beyond technology to the healthcare field, knowing that our healthcare professionals want the opportunity to spend time in laboratories. We have Dr. Nagy in the back there somewhere. And I think this is the opportunity for the public and the private sector to push against each other around what is possible. So for everybody that's staying home, in my experience, they're calling on Amazon to come and deliver their groceries. They're calling on Grubhub to come and deliver their meals. All those people who are serving in those low education jobs are not making enough money, and so they're being forced onto Medicaid. There's not enough Medicaid providers in town, so we have to increase our workforce around healthcare. So there's outcomes for every single thing that's happening right now in our workforce. We have to change how we think about how we provide services for our general base community, our economy. And I think thinking about our downtown and infill development is incredibly complicated because every time you want to change your downtown, you have the neighborhoods that are pushing, saying, don't change it. We like it the way it is. We like it with the way it's been for the last 50 years. And so as a local government, thinking about the expansion of downtown, thinking about transit-oriented development, thinking about who's going to utilize those services in the downtown core, you have to really rethink everything that we've done over the last 20 years because it's drastically changing, and it's changing faster than we can keep up with. So I'm going to do a quick plug again. I think there's a real opportunity right now to rethink our healthcare sector. And as we think about the downtown core, thinking about what doctors want when they come into a downtown, what will make them want to live in and around a downtown core. It's going to be transit. It's going to be schools that their kids can go to. It's going to be potential research opportunities so that they can expand their own careers and their own opportunities. And that in and of itself creates jobs that will generate more revenue for our community.
Awesome. So I'm going to go back to David. So thinking about what Molly said and what Brian said around increasing entrepreneurship and trying to bring different groups of people into town, are there other factors that, such as public safety, new business creation, housing, that are required in order for that to work?
Yes, and it's a big question. One of the things I think we all need to recognize is people like being around other people, for the most part. When you go to a vibrant downtown, it's vibrant because there's people there. There's activity, they're going around, they're going to different shops, to restaurants, to meeting each other at the dog park, whatever that activity is, people like being around other people. One of the challenges we have with our urban form today is we have pockets like what Las Vegas and the Downtown Project have done in downtown Las Vegas to create an urban environment that you don't have to worry necessarily about cars speeding through, that you have lower speed limits, you have wider sidewalks. When I say wider, that are actually, you can walk next to someone on a sidewalk. For everybody that thinks 5 feet is enough sidewalk width, I'm here to tell you it's not. Try walking with your significant other on a sidewalk and then having to scoot around the fire hydrants or the street light poles or the whatever is out there until somebody else is coming the other way, and then you're like, wow, it's really narrow. At the same time, we afford way too much space to cars, and I'm not anti-car. I love cars. I love motorcycles. I love riding bikes. But the thing is you have to put it in proportion for people to feel safe. So one of the things that we're focused on are creating complete streets, which I think are essential to supporting downtown development, really transit-oriented development. You have to have the full trip in mind when you think about the customer experience, from when they leave their house, where they're walking, how safe they feel, how secure they feel. Again, more people on the street creates a perception of more safety, generally speaking. When you're walking, do you have enough sidewalk? Do you have enough shade? Do you feel comfortable that the cars aren't going too fast, that you're going to get hit when you walk in the crosswalk? is transit accessible? And then from that point, when you look at transit, think of it as like a horizontal elevator that connects our community together. A good example is the Maryland Parkway Bus Rapid Transit project we're working on, which connects, our airport to the main university campus, to downtown Las Vegas, and then over to the Las Vegas Medical District, where the other campus of the university is, as well as UMC, Valley Hospital, all the medical offices in that area. Here we're creating this link and trying to create a seamless connection, essentially walking out the door, getting on the horizontal elevator, going to catch lunch in downtown somewhere, or go wherever you're going to go home. Complement that with biking. We have bike share that we put out there. Again, how do we create, however people want to travel, how do we create a good customer experience for them, whether they're walking, biking, taking transit, driving their car?
Okay. And so are there things in Las Vegas that are unique, say with the addition of the 40 million plus visitors that we get a year?
Well, the visitors, we love the visitors. I think the other part, though, is people, even working from home, still want to get out of the house. They want to feel like they're part of a larger community. And how do you create that experience? For us, yes, I think it's unique. I think part of what we saw is there was a lot of working from home, but not as much because of the nature of our economy as maybe other peer cities. So for us, I think we're looking at how do we enable mobility that's accessible for everybody, that they can feel safe, they can feel secure, and get around.
Thank you. Molly, so you mentioned the benefit of working at home, but Las Vegas has a really high proportion of people without college degrees. And so we're also really diverse. Are there examples of policies or programs that we should be thinking about that would strengthen our urban areas while providing economic opportunity for more people?
Yes, that's a great question. So when I reflect on this, I think a lot about the individual worker. And throughout the pandemic, I had the privilege of speaking constantly to especially low-wage workers throughout the pandemic, primarily essential workers who still had to show up during the pandemic, and grocery stores and warehouses and nursing homes and hospitals. But I've also talked to a wide range of workers. And I think we've all seen headlines called the Great Resignation. I actually think the theme of the last 3 years is the Great Rethink. Not resigning, but rethink. And what we've seen is a huge amount of change. People have given opportunities, forced sometimes because their industries, like here in Las Vegas, shut down, or because of a tight labor market that had the ability to move. People really changed. They looked at their work, they looked at their life and said, I want to change. A lot of people left the lowest paying, most precarious hospitality jobs and shifted into other sectors. We saw people completely change their career. We saw some people have the opportunity to telework and say, actually, that works so much better for my family or my life. So a lot of these changes have been sticky. And I think, what does that look like for Las Vegas to have a great rethink? What have we learned from the last 3 years to not go back to the same that we were and just do more of it? What does it look like to take opportunity to change? And I think of 3 really big trends, forces that are coming, that it would be interesting for Las Vegas to think really hard about how to take advantage of this to make jobs better and to make opportunity better. One is around demographic change. Something I'm working on at Brookings is the aging of the baby boomers. We're just like 4 or 5 years away from the baby boomers to start hitting 85. 85 is an age where you need a lot of care. You need a lot of health care. You need a lot of care. Dementia, Alzheimer's. There is going to be huge opportunities in healthcare in the coming years because of the aging of our population. Those create a huge number of good jobs at all different levels. They also create some bad jobs. So for instance, home care workers is a occupation I focus a lot on. This is a very underpaid, undervalued job. Nevada has just done something really remarkable. They made that a better job through bipartisan work, and your legislature just approved a big pay increase for home care workers. So here's an example of taking advantage of a change that's coming and making those jobs better. But there's a lot more that the state and the city can do to really double down in healthcare to meet the growing needs, but also to create good jobs. The second is we are seeing huge investment out of where I live, Washington, in infrastructure, in clean energy, in semiconductors. my colleagues at Brookings Metro working on this left and right, they're talking about the huge opportunity for better jobs, particularly for the same demographic in this region that's so focused on leisure and hospitality. Having a high school degree, there's huge amounts of opportunity where the federal government is investing billions and billions of dollars. I don't necessarily see this region fully taking advantage of those opportunities. And the third is the other issue that I'm working on now at Brookings, which is generative AI and technology. And on the one hand, when I look at the makeup of your population and your occupational mix and your education mix, I think, actually, you know, there's a silver lining in having a workforce that's less knowledge workers and more based in more service, low-wage work, which is generative AI is more of a cognitive development. The potential that it's unleashing is really a little bit more for sort of more educated workers. The more educated you are, frankly, the more exposed you are to generative AI. So on the one hand, you can look at that and say, oh, well, our industries are safe from the kind of disruptions of generative AI coming to take our jobs. But I think that's short-sighted. I think if you look at, there's a lot of fears, I have them, that generative AI, as it gets better and better and better, there are a lot of higher skilled occupations that are going to be vulnerable to displacement, but potentially just disruption, from writers to accountants to the legal field. But most of the upside to this technology to make people much more productive, much better at their job, wealthier, is going to come at the higher end of education. So I think if this region really wants to seize the opportunity of generative AI, it's twofold. It's thinking about really creatively, how can you deploy this technology in the industries you have? I'd love to see your hospitality school take on this issue of generative AI and see, how can this be a tool that makes our hospitality workers better at their job, better experts, better paid, and not just displaced. But then really thinking about, how can we make sure we're diversifying the industries here? We're attracting higher educated workers to really take advantage of the technology that's coming. So I think when I think of the Great Rethink, I hope that this is a region that learned from the last 3 years to really seize into the future and take advantage of the changes that are coming.
Great points. So this is for all the panelists. Ideally, Molly mentioned infrastructure. Ideally, what kind of infrastructure do we need to build and to support more economic development and the strengthening of the urban cores? In addition, I think, to some of the suggestions that she made.
I didn't get a last question, so I'm going to go first.
Okay.
I think of the infrastructure differently. So in the presentation we heard earlier, we heard Vegas needs to do this, we need to do this. We all know that. The challenge, I think, in talking about transit-oriented development or looking at our aging population is getting rid of the pronoun we. We need to do that. It actually needs to be somebody or some individual or some organization that takes the mantle and champions it. That's what we're missing in Nevada from an elected official's perspective, is you can't use the pronoun we anymore because it's very difficult to figure out who's responsible. Is it the state, the county, the city, the transit authority, the university? All those people together are coming up with talking a lot about the future of Nevada, talking a lot about what we need, but there's no actions associated with it. So we have got to transform transit. We all know that, but who's going to do that? That we need to transform how we fund transportation in the state of Nevada. That means we have to have a private sector partner that champions transportation in Nevada, because there's a lot of people that don't want to change how we do transportation right now. So if you want additional transit in Nevada, you're going to have to, like, those people in the room, you raise your hand, like, who's going to do that? Because it's not going to be a we, it's going to be some individual, some organization that's going to champion that. If we want to take advantage of the healthcare opportunities, enormous healthcare opportunities, if I were to ask anybody in this room, if you have a primary care physician, you probably don't. And if you were to say, can you get an appointment with your primary care physician in the next 6 to 8 weeks? You probably can't, because we don't have enough physicians in town, and we don't have enough support staff to support those physicians. So who in this room, because you're all leaders, who's going to take up that mantle to build out the healthcare sector within Southern Nevada? And you can do it in Nevada. That's what makes Nevada amazing. Because if you want a baseball team in here, you can go into Oakland and steal their baseball team in a matter of months. If you want a football stadium, you can do it in a matter of months. Why can't we do that with transit or healthcare or housing? You can do that. You just need the right room of champions, the right amount of leaders, and they have to challenge each other. And that is our challenge. That's the timing is right to build out healthcare sector. The timing is right to build out biotech here. The timing is right to build out transit-oriented development. But y'all have to agree to it. Y'all have to understand the importance of your individual roles in making sure Nevada is prepared for the future. That didn't answer any questions.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. Thank you. Also, workforce development, right? Stronger ties and making sure that workforce development is embedded in all of those decisions and plans. So yeah, I'll go back to the question again. what other kind of, do Molly and David want to add anything to that question? Do you want me to repeat it?
Wait, I'm going to say one more thing. My
Okay,
chair is
sure.
very wobbly, and I feel like I'm going to fall over any second now. Just the infrastructure that we need to develop is people who can be leaders within our community. That is the most important and critical infrastructure step we can take, is building up the leadership pipeline. Sorry.
No, excellent.
I agree. I think one of the challenges we've had in the past that is thankfully waning a little bit is we had a very transient population. People came here, they looked for opportunities, and they never sank their roots in. They never took ownership in the community to say, I live here, this is home. So think of it, the roots are just kind of on the surface and they're spreading out, they're not going deep. What we're seeing now is, I think, a little bit more ownership to what you're saying. Also, we need a centralized, cohesive vision for what we want to accomplish. And I part of that, I won't comment on the governance structure and all that, but there are some challenges in getting that central vision and a key champion. Going forward, we have to just have an honest assessment of where we are today, where we want to be in the future. Part of that is what we're doing with our Southern Nevada Strong plan update, so please get involved with that. But think about how our community is currently developed and where are some of the challenges that we create for ourselves. When we have literally hundreds and hundreds of acres of one development type, i.e. single-family houses, and they say, well, I don't have any access to the grocery store. Yeah, you're right, you don't. It's miles away. You have no choice but to get in your car and go travel to this strip mall to go to your grocery store. We haven't created the urban centers that I think we all long for. Who remembers when Town Square opened, right? Everybody was showing up there. Why? Because it was like this faux urban experience, and I'm not demeaning the development. I think it's awesome, but there was such a pent-up demand for people wanting to be with other people in a common space with all the amenities. And I think what Las Vegas is doing in downtown, what Henderson's trying to do on Water Street, other parts of the valley, downtown Summerlin, there's these pockets that are being created that people want to see, but we have to have an honest assessment of how we develop going into the future. Going with homogeneous land use types out to the periphery of the valley is not going to improve our day-to-day quality of life. You have no choice but to drive somewhere, especially if we're targeting manufacturing, which arguably would probably have mid-wage jobs. Are we assuming that they can now afford to have a car and travel 20 miles each way to go to a job? Unless we build the houses out where the jobs are, you're not going to get enough employees to show up. So I think that's our challenge, that you need to have a voice as leaders are talking about different plans going forward. It's yes, we want to do that, and let's add add the flavor to it, right? Don't just give us the dough. Add the spice. But beyond that, Rebels make it happen. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Woo! Molly, any comments you want to add? We have a few minutes left.
Yeah, I think I love the statement not to use generic we. It's who is going to do this. None of this seems inevitable. You have to do it. So, I think there's a lot of assets here. You've got a philanthropic community that's very invested. I think this is a city that gets big, bold things done. But I do think the inertia of it's very easy to do the things you've always done and keep doing more of them, and to sort of go for the big event and not sort of slog through all the difficulties of figuring out the infrastructure for something like healthcare. So, but I think, this is a place where big things happen, and I just wanted to say that I think everything I've heard on this panel is spot on.
Thank you. Any last comments before we end this panel and I transfer my role to the next moderator?
Support transit. Support transit. Support healthcare. Get out there and find your role and make a change in Nevada. You have the opportunity to do that. That's what Nevada is. That's why Nevada is amazing, is because you can make a change here. So get involved and get engaged.
Absolutely. I want to thank the panelists so much for their insights and their suggestions. And I hope you have the rest safe travels back to DC. Thank you. It's nice to meet you all. I'd like to bring to the stage Gabby Turiel, who will be moderating the next panel. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are we feeling today? We must not be feeling that good if that's the response. How are we feeling today? Come on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute honor to be here with you all today. I am a proud UNLV alum myself. Class of 22, if you're in the house. Just me? Okay, it's okay. Anyways, we have an amazing presentation for you all today. It is going to be very full of different topics, so we are going to ask that our panelists here keep it short, but we hope that you enjoy. We're going to hit a couple of different topics here. So, closest to me, let's go ahead and begin. We do have Dr. Stephen Miller here from the Center for Business and Economic Research. Thank you for being here, sir. Round of applause for him. In the middle, we do have Mr. John Restrepo. He's the principal for RCG Economics here. Another round of applause. And then, as you know, at the very far end, we have Andrew Woods, who is a director for the Center for Business and Economic Research here at UNLV. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We're talking about the U.S. economy first. So let's start with the big question. Recession or no recession?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So CBER has been on record for about 2 years saying we're going to have a soft landing. And the odds have turned in our favor considerably. Most people were expecting a recession. So we're sticking by our guns. We think we're going to have a soft landing. Labor market is just so unbelievably strong. But we're going to talk a bit at the end about some recession scenarios that we performed, just to be on the safe side.
Hedging your bet there, Steve?
No, it was your idea, Andrew, remember?
Yeah. John, you want to add anything?
Yeah, you know, I far be it from me to disagree with the great Dr. Miller, but I think that's true. When we're looking at the data right now, we're seeing some pretty interesting trends. One, productivity has gone up pretty much, really good numbers on the productivity side. Worker productivity, labor force participation rate has gone up. Legal immigration is still pretty strong. So all these things are creating a very strong GDP. And so as long as those things hold up, and it's slowing a bit now, but we do not see a deep recession or a crash, so to speak. We see a soft landing probably in 2025. Things are slowing down. There are some concerns out there with the deficit and the debt, but overall, it's been amazing, really, how resilient the U.S. economy is. And it's remained so for a variety of reasons. We can get at that in a minute, as compared to what we're seeing in China and in Europe. Not to say that what's happening globally can't affect us ultimately, but right now the general resilience of the economy in the U.S. is incredibly strong.
And I can just speak back to when we talked about this in the spring, or we talked about it last fall. I mean, I do think, the American consumer continues to prove us wrong. How many of you made a large purchase in the last week, say $100 or more? Raise your hand. Thank you for your purchases, right? I mean, you are really proving us all, about how the economy just continues to truck forward because of the American consumer. We're watching how American businesses kind of adapt to this. We've seen some of the supply chain shortages kind of ease up. We've seen that the labor market still continues to be strong, but at the same time, you've got rising interest rates, which are going to make cost of doing business more expensive. You have higher wage rates, which are also making cost of business more expensive. We see the credit card debt is getting more expensive. We obviously know about the housing market. So it is interesting that we continue to move forward, and I agree that we don't see a recession on the horizon. That doesn't mean there aren't warning lights, as we'll talk a little bit more about.
Well, if I could jump in, there's one thing that we can say about Americans. We are very tribal politically. We may be in a political civil war. But one thing we all agree on, we like to spend money and spending on our credit cards. So one thing we all love as Americans is debt. So at some point, we're going to have to deal with the question of rising credit card debt and consumer debt and those sorts of things. But for right now, that strength of consumer spending and business spending has really bolstered our economy. It doesn't hurt also that we have relatively inexpensive oil right now. Oil's around $80 a barrel, which helps dramatically, and we have a potentially very strong domestic oil production industry. So we have a lot of things going for us right now, but we do have to be a little bit concerned on the debt question over time.
So you brought up some really great points. I think one of the things that we all as consumers, as residents, who are trying to contribute to our economy, but also want to see it continue to increase, is we've heard about the potential recession that was going to happen in 2023. Now we're less than 2 months away from 2024. We still haven't seen it, and we're going to talk later about whether or not that will happen. But we keep hearing these forecasts. Is it going to happen? Why does it feel like these forecasts are essentially being predicted wrong? What is your opinion on that? What do you foresee?
Well, the forecaster's motto is often wrong, never in doubt. So you'll forget about my mistakes of the past. No, forecasting is very difficult. Certainly once you go beyond maybe 6 months. But we just don't see a recession in the cards, even though a number of signals out there are suggesting a recession. One thing that we need to focus on is the consumers have been very strong, and the reason they've been very strong is because of the government largesse going into the pandemic, when the extra payment for being unemployed was tacked on. $600 a week. If you worked a 40-hour week, that's $15 an hour. That's what many states have as their minimum wage. And that was on top of their unemployment compensation they were already receiving from the state. And as I've said many times, you and I, we're not stupid, and we understand that the pandemic was a dire straits, because certainly here in Nevada we shut down operations. You know, if you shut down operations, that's not good for the economy. So people didn't spend that money, they saved it. You say, oh no, I didn't save it, I paid down my debt. No, that's saving. When you pay down your debt, you're saving. And that extra saving, at one point it reached over 18% per month, and typically it's around 7-8% a month. That stock of saving accumulated and has been used in the last couple of years to finance expanded consumption. Now, once again, we're talking about forecasts. People are trying to forecast how much of that excess saving is left. I think what the consensus seems to be that we're about at the bottom. The only people that have any excess saving left are in the top 20%. The bottom 80% have already spent it off. So consumers may not be as strong going forward in the next year or two.
Let's talk some more about that. So we just had a blowout advance estimate for Q3 of this year with a 4.9% real GDP. Now, the US economy appears to be the only advanced economy in the world that is contributing to this growth. Do you think that that is sustainable?
Well, let's wait for the revision. That was a flash estimate. So we got 2 more revisions coming. That may come down. That's an unbelievable number. The real question is how much of that number is sort of a one-time event. So part of it was inventory adjustment and exports, and then there was consumption. Those items may disappear. So that 4.9% may be a one-off.
I will say, so I just want to explain the chart above us too, is just the change in our forecasts every quarter. So we do this every quarter, our US and Southern Nevada forecast. And you can see with that 4.9% number, it has just really elevated 2023. The question is, can we continue to hit those same growth rates next year? Especially as consumers now start to see those credit card bills and the interest rates, as well as auto loans, and same with corporate and commercial properties, right? They're all gonna have to be refinancing their debt. I don't think those are, we continue in a recession when there's something that happens really quickly. In this case, these are slow moving fires that we can see, and so if the economy is able to adapt to them, then as we keep saying, there's going to be a soft landing. But at the same time, the U.S. economy continues to kind of buck the trend for the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is not seeing the same numbers.
So let's continue the conversation on rates, right? Interest, inflation, huge topics on our mind, the I words that we don't love, but we have to hear anyways. So what do you see in regards to these rates? Where do you see them going? And is your opinion really based on your preferred measure of inflation?
If I could answer that, yeah. Right now we have, interest rates, obviously mortgage rates, interest rates are at 5%. The T-bill rate is at 4.5, let's say 5% rounded up. That's pretty good. Pretty good numbers, I think. As the economy remains strong, I think Dr. Miller is absolutely right. There's going to be a downward adjustment in the GDP number. probably to about the 3.5% range. I think in the longer term, we're talking GDP growth, maybe 1 to 2% a year, which is not bad. That's kind of marks the historical trend. But I think what I'm still focusing on is how much more we can increase worker productivity, particularly with technology. What we can do there, and what do we need to do with the workforce participation rate. I really liked what Molly said earlier, this whole issue, the debate right now with remote work and what that's done to labor force participation rate for women. I think that's an incredibly important part of what our discussion that doesn't get a lot of play sometimes when we're saying everyone's going to go back to work in an office somewhere. So I think that's critical. But I think overall, the question for at least for Southern Nevada and all of this is how do we change our economy? How do we adapt our economy to take advantage of this resilient economy that we have right now and to grow over time considering all these changes in interest rates and labor force participation rate. Inflation, I think it's coming down pretty significantly, but we do still have the debt issue to deal with. But I think the question of where we're heading is really going to not be so much determined by U.S. policy necessarily, U.S. economic policy, but what the global changes are going to happen, whether it's the Ukraine war or this horrible mess in the Middle East and those sorts of things, where it's going to really determine where we're going as a country. We can drill down into the Las Vegas opportunities and challenges in a minute, but I think these global economic political trends, I think have yet really been felt completely.
I'd also like to point out that inflation's sticky, and we have not slain the inflation dragon. I mean, as you can see from the chart, we're certainly a lot lower than we were at the beginning of the year. We're still far above that 2% target. And I think that is still top of mind for the Federal Reserve. I do think they are the driver's seat for driving down inflation. I also think there's a lot of backseat drivers now in terms of geopolitics and how the other signals from the economy are coming to them. But we're still not to that 2% target. If you listen to Chairman Powell's remarks last week, he said that in their conversations, they're not even talking about at all cutting rates. They're still talking about have they raised them high enough? I will show you this next chart. This is our updated dot plot. This is the CBER dot plot. And so you've got Steve, myself, John, as well as we polled our economics department for what they think interest rates will go at, so where they will be in the Q4 at the end of each year. So you've got 2023 at the end of next year and then the year afterwards. You can see they're staying higher for longer. And if I looked at this over time, you would ask us, say, a year ago, right? We probably would have said, I remember we were debating last November, if you were at our Outlook, whether they'd even cross 5%. Well, they've crossed 5%. Now we're still debating if they're going to go up to 5.75 in terms of the median, or are they going to go up to 6 even, right? I think those are still in the cards, and those are the unexpected things that could cause things to kind of tip out of balance. But so far, the American consumer and American business continues to prove us wrong.
So in that dot chart, I see I'm sort of the median response in all three of those, but disclaimer, I answered that before the 4.9% GDP growth rate came out. And what will the Fed do? They're the important player here. If you're hoping for interest rate declines, don't bet too much. Maybe I'm saying out there in 2025. But the Fed doesn't want to make the mistake of dropping rates too fast, too soon. They're going to hold the fort. If they do make a mistake, they'll hold it too long, and we'll have a recession. They actually had it said at several of their meetings about raising the unemployment rate. Well, the unemployment rate is actually going up. It was down at 3.4, now it's at 3.9. Not a huge change, and 3.9 is really low by historic standards. But the question is that going to continue to go up? The number of jobs was less than anticipated, 150,000. I know, okay, so there were 30,000 that were on strike, which is a new part of the economic scenario. What will the effect of the strikes have, if anything, on the economy? Then we have to be concerned about what will the effect of the war in Europe, 2 wars in Europe, have on the economy. We have a lot, and will they shut down the government? And will that affect the economy? So forecasting is not an easy thing at the moment.
Yeah, and I put some qualifiers. We can usually look at the things that are within the economy and maybe do some prediction there. It's these black swan events. I was just with the head researcher over at the Atlanta Fed, and the Dallas Fed also was at that conference, and they both were talking about these black swan events. Those are the ones that are really hard to predict, these shocks that we may not be talking about right now.
Right. They're usually on the political side. They start small and they grow. But I think Steve made an interesting point, and that is, what will the Fed do? You know, if the Fed was really concerned about inflation right now, they would have raised rates. They're less concerned about inflation getting worse, so they're keeping rates steady, not dropping them. And they're also looking at all these other economic indicators that still remain strong, as I mentioned earlier, the productivity numbers, and even wages are finally going up after adjusting for inflation, which has been a drag on the economy for many years. So there's a lot of known unknowns out there right now. We're all watching them very closely.
So with that being said, let's continue this ball rolling on the economy. How would you rate the Southern Nevada economy right now?
Good, I guess. I mean, it's a weird question, but
well, what we need is cards with numbers.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing well. I very well, considering. But again, we're doing well because consumer spending's up. Remember, we're driven by the kindness of strangers, as the late like Dr. Robert Lang used to say, and that is meaning consumer spending and business spending. So as long as discretionary spending stays up, I mean, it's cooling down because people are taking on more and more debt, we'll do fine. But again, it goes back to the question, what is the structure of our economy in the long term, and what do we need to do to become, get away from being the poster child of the most impacted economy during downturns. So, but right now, we're doing fine. As long as the consumer and business spending remains relatively healthy, we'll do fine. If there is a downturn in that, as Dr. Miller indicated earlier, then we're challenged, for sure.
I would say the Las Vegas economy is doing well. One issue that is still being adjusted is that the unemployment rate in Nevada and in Southern Nevada is the highest in the country. And here in Southern Nevada, we're about 2% above the national unemployment rate. My explanation for that is it's a structural problem. You know, economists talk about unemployment due to insufficient demand. That's not what this is about. Or unemployment due to a mismatch of labor skills and demand for labor skills. And Molly was talking earlier about how people had a rethink. I think we called it a restructuring. And the labor market is restructuring. And when you have that restructuring going on, I don't think it's completed yet. People are still deciding, still moving. And because of that, my interpretation is the higher unemployment rate here in Southern Nevada is because of structural unemployment, which is a microeconomic problem. So you don't address that with fiscal policy or monetary policy, you address that with human capital policy.
And I just want to show also on the screen, we poll our businesses every quarter, right? We send out the survey. How many of you have taken our Southern Nevada Business Confidence Survey at some point? Raise your hand, right? They're still very cynical. This is the results, right? Very cynical about a recession coming, even though we have very strong economic conditions outside of the unemployment rate in Southern Nevada. And you can see that. And we've seen this pretty consistent since the pandemic, that there's this uncertainty around another recession. And then you can look at, this is the overall index score we're showing. So what's been interesting to me is just this, it's like a roller coaster. I mean, it's like the New York roller coaster. I mean, it's just up and down ever since the pandemic. You know, we're sometimes feeling really good and we get to these highs of highs, and then we literally just last year got to the lowest we've ever gotten, worse than the pandemic. So it's just kind of like, what is driving that sentiment despite all of the indicators, at least for Southern Nevada, looking pretty strong?
Yeah, you know, I think that's a great point, Andrew. You look at those numbers up there, you know, the macro indicators are all very strong, or primarily, mostly strong. It's the micro indicators, how the family feels, how you feel as an individual, what your concerns about cost of living issues and political uncertainty and things like that. I think a lot of that's contributed by the political uncertainty. People are nervous about the election, what's going to go on in the next in the next year or so, a year and a half till we get to the presidential elections. There's a lot of that personal uncertainty about things. But at the macro level, it's very strong. So what's that misconnect? And obviously it's affecting the Biden administration because they're showing all these great economic numbers, but people still feel not really good about their own personal situation. And so how does that change? That changes if we have a more stable, I think, political environment, more stable political culture, which allays some of those fears. But it is kind of a weird situation where the macro numbers are strong and the micro numbers at the business level, at the family level, are people just nervous.
And I think at the next Outlook, we'll invite a psychologist to come on stage with us and help explain.
We'll give everyone therapy during the presentation.
Dr. Stephen, did you have something to add?
So I'm sort of going to go back to inflation. So a lot of people are confused about inflation. So inflation is the process of prices rising again and 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 again. Once the prices have risen, they'll stay up there, except maybe for food and energy, because the food and energy prices tend to be more volatile. They'll go up, they'll go down, they'll go down, they'll go up. But a lot of prices are sort of downward inflexible. They tend to go up and they stay up. And so I think the uncertainty, the concern the families have is not so much the inflation rate, but the level of prices. How much did it cost me to renew my newspaper subscription? I know you probably don't have newspapers.
What's a newspaper?
You're not old enough, you know. You have to have a lot of gray hair.
So we talked about the rates, we talked about inflation, talked a little bit about jobs. So let's continue that conversation. Have the labor and management dynamics changed since the pandemic, in your personal opinion?
Without question.
Yeah.
What's happened has been a sea change that management has lost power and labor has gained power. And management is dealing with the new environment and is taking some time for them to recognize that they're in a new environment. And that's why you see all the strikes and rumors of strikes and that are plaguing our economy. We're not sure exactly how much the strike activity is going to affect the economy because it's not in either side's interest to go on strike.
Right. But there is, Dr. Miller's absolutely, there's a huge sea change in the balance of power between labor and management. There was a statistic I saw last night on Bloomberg that related to the most recent strikes, so the UAW strikes, the writers' strike, the healthcare striking workers in California, a variety of other strikes, and that it was a Gallup poll that Bloomberg reported on, that 71% of Americans were in support of the strikes. That's the highest percentage since 1965. And so what's happened over many, many years is we've seen profits grow dramatically. The wealthiest of us, of our citizens, have done incredibly well, and the middle class and the working poor have declined in their purchasing power and in their standards of living. That has changed because partially because of the pandemic, demographic changes. There's a variety of things into play. So there's a huge shift of power going toward workers and labor unions at this point. I'm not saying it's good or bad. My own political preferences in that regard, but it's a real thing. And I think we're going to continue to see worker power increase over time. Now, the downside for the workers, I guess, taken to the extreme, is that may encourage companies to move more to automation, AI, and robotics, and then use less workers. And so there's this balancing act between worker strength and power and the incentive to companies to replace those workers, or some of them at least, with automation. And so there's a whole new world we're living in right now in that regard.
That's just an adjustment in the structure of the labor market, which started it all.
So, and it's showing here, so CBER tracks the job openings to job seekers ratio. You probably hear this every time the job numbers come out. Sometimes it gets flipped. But essentially, what this is showing you that overall in the U.S. economy, there's 1.51 job openings to every job seeker, someone out there looking for a job. In leisure and hospitality, right now, it's 1.93, right? And the historical average on this is 0.6. So our job market is really, historically, it's upside down right now in terms of the amount of strength workers have. Part of this is, we have 3 million missing workers across the country. We estimate in Nevada it's about 88,000 workers. In southern Nevada, it's about 52,000 to 53,000 missing workers from the workforce. And this is what you maybe heard during my intro. We talked about, we've been working with the Gwynn Center, with the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation on this, is what happened to those workers. And what we found, at least some early results, it's still early, is that there is a strong correlation with the education structure in Southern Nevada and the type of jobs that we have that is encouraging some people to drop out of the workforce. And it's not, and what was interesting is the people dropping out of the workforce were not people that were moving here. We thought initially the hypothesis was, oh, it was a bunch of retirees, they just moved here. There was a little bit of that, but actually the people moving here were backfilling the jobs that Nevadans were basically dropping out of. So they were the ones moving in and working in leisure and hospitality. They were the ones moving in, working in transportation and warehousing. And so that was a bigger predictor for us in terms of what's going on in your labor force participation rate. Now, it's unique to every state, so I can't say that that applies to Utah or Arizona, but this is the story, I think, for the year that we've been watching. This is what the Chairman Powell is watching, is what's going on in the labor market, and it continues to defy expectations, but it's because we don't have as many workers.
Right.
Now, I want to make sure we talk about this because we touched on it a little bit already. We all know the big events that are coming this year, right, with Formula One coming the next coming days, and then with the Super Bowl, which is a huge deal coming early in 2024. So, you know, we all were excited to hear that it was coming to our city, but at the same time, as locals, as residents having to commute, we knew what that would mean for us as well. So do you really think that this is going to have a great impact on the economy as they so hyped it up to be? Or what is your opinion on that?
Go ahead, Joe.
Nice.
I'll jump in. I'd say I don't think people realize, I certainly didn't, the amount of disruption that was going to take place prior to. Now, the good news is the next time around, a lot of that will not need to be redone. And maybe you know, we always overcome here in Las Vegas. But certainly there's a lot of sort of negative press out there reflecting, you know, individual discouragement with what's going on for the locals.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there was a particularly large amount of analysis, for lack of a better term, done when we decided to invite Formula One here and what are the negative externalities in the economy when Formula One is here. Yes, there are benefits, clearly, of Formula One being here, PR benefits, even some economic benefits related to Formula One being here. But there are also a lot of negatives, and I'm not sure if those were really taken into account on the impact on tourism, how we're viewed by tourists that can't get around, what's happening to the workers trying to get to work, and all those sorts of things. And so I think oftentimes we get a little wrapped up on kind of the cheerleading side of things here in Southern Nevada, and now look at things a little more critically when we invite large events here or do make economic policies. I'd like something that Dr. Chapple said earlier. Talking about economic growth is a lot different discussion than talking about economic development. Economic development speaks to the quality of an economy, not just broad growth. I'll use my weird little example I've used 100 times. I remember, for those who've been here a long time, I remember a number of years ago, we were all very excited because we were going to diversify our economy by bringing in call centers, and so that people wouldn't be so dependent on the resort industry. So all we did there was replace low-skilled jobs, low-wage jobs in the resort industry with call center jobs for a period of time until they migrated to India and Latin America and other parts of Asia. So we just have to be really cognizant of what it means to have a developed economy, and that speaks to the quality of the workforce and education, all those sorts of things. And that's kind of, we're at that tipping point right now as our community, what we want to be when we grow up, basically.
I think it goes back to these conversations, just thinking ahead. So if we want to move from 40 million visitors to 45 million visitors to 50 million visitors, we really need to have an honest conversation about infrastructure for not just our visitors, but also for our workers and for our residents.
And that's human infrastructure, right? And not just we do great on the physical side.
We can do better.
Something on the human side, we kind of let it think it's going to change, you know, by itself. But anyway.
Because we're winding down here the last couple of minutes, I want to make sure I ask this question, but I'm going to ask for a yes or no answer from each of you. If a slowdown does happen in the near future, do you think that we will be the first to feel the brunt of that slowdown, and will we see massive layoffs the way that we saw during the pandemic? Yes or no?
No.
You kept it short, like I asked.
Maybe.
That was the most verbose statement I've ever heard the doctor use. No, I think we will be, we usually get hit the hardest because of the nature of our economy. Is it going to be massive job losses like we saw in the Great Recession and the pandemic recession? No, but I think we'll be the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. If a deeper recession than we're all thinking is going to happen happens, I think we'll be the first one to see it because we were so driven by discretionary spending.
And I just want to show, so we're not forecasting recession. This is our forecast right now for visitor volume. This is subject to change every quarter. You can see we kind of think we're at a steady rate right now. And the record is just under 43 million. So we could, depending on how well Formula One goes and Super Bowl and what event is behind that continues to drive in, and how robust the American consumer is, we could hit that. But right now we're kind of saying, well, this is going to be pretty stable. Do we want to get to the recession scenarios?
Yeah.
Okay, so we did this little project, and this came to us for a couple people ringing my phone. But essentially, I want to be clear, we're not forecasting recession, but we were asked if there was a recession, whether it's mild or something stronger, what happens? And we brought John and his team in on this to get a difference of opinion. This might be hard to read, but essentially, on average, when we looked at the recessions after 1945, with minus the pandemic, they tend to last for about just under a year. And they affect about 2.5% GDP. And so in this case, we show that there's, and this will be in the Outlook report, so if you actually want to dig into this, we have a whole appendix on it. But essentially, there's 5 different scenarios. There's a mild and strong, there's a mild and strong for RCG, and then there's a median. So what happens? This is at the US level, right? So then what happens to unemployment in Southern Nevada? And as you can see, we forecast, because again, the idea here is just how sensitive are we to a future downturn. Essentially, we go from 6% unemployment upwards to 8-9% in a mild recession, which is roughly around, I think it's about 25,000 workers would lose their jobs. But if we have something much harder, which is some of these I think might be caused by some of these black swan events, so you have maybe a slowdown in spending, but then something else happens that really shocks the economy, then we could be back up to about 12% unemployment, which if you look at 2008, unemployment reached about 14%. The pandemic was a huge anomaly, but we keep getting fooled by saying they'll never happen again. That was 34%. So you can see here we're still pretty vulnerable, and a lot of that is it's not to blame any one industry, it's just the structure of our economy and how sensitive we are. And particularly, as to John's point, I guess is where I was going with this, is that we can also see that there are certain industries that will get hit first, such as leisure and hospitality, where we could potentially lose 14,000 to 15,000 jobs if there's a slowdown right away.
And in respect to everyone's time, we just want to ask any few quick closing remarks.
Or comments on this.
No remarks.
Speechless.
It was so good.
Dr. Miller? Okay. Buy crypto. No, I'm kidding.
Come on.
Don't buy crypto.
It's the greatest investment ever. Crypto, shotgun, and food. Like I say,
He's joking.
That's what I'm doing. Plus, I'm happy because I saved $29 a month because I changed over to a new type of car insurance. But I think for us, it's just to watch the data closely, watch the information closely, pay attention to the news, listen. Not that the economists are perfect, like we indicated earlier. The economists are predicting 9 of the last 5 recessions, but pay attention to the data. Make sure you save money. You can't go broke with cash. Just a very detailed concept I just came up with. And I think we're going to be okay. But again, just watch the indicators. Listen to what the Fed is saying. Watch the business media. Read your Twitter, your social media feeds. Stay away from Truth Social because it's not necessarily truth. I'm sorry about that. But just pay attention to what's going on around you and not stick your heads in the sand, basically, because sometimes as human beings we have a tendency not to want to deal with things out here because we're dealing with things right in front of us. So just pay attention to the indicators in the news as it comes out.
If you're not an economist, don't pay any attention to all this stuff, okay? You just need to look at one variable. Look at the unemployment rate. If the unemployment rate starts going up, then you should be concerned.
Well, with that, I want to thank you all for being here with us, and I want to thank our panel. Thank you very much for this session.
So Steve, don't go anywhere. So all of you know Dr. Stephen Miller has been with us a long time, and I just want to give a really special recognition to him, if you've got a minute here. So Steve just celebrated 22 years with UNLV. Before that, he was at the University of Connecticut teaching economics for, what, 30 plus years? 31 years, so 53 years in economics. And you have not only been an invaluable help to me in my career, but also to, I think, all your students, to the university, to the community. And I just want to thank you for your service. We have here from Senator Cortez Masto's office a commendation for your service to the community. And I also have here from Congressman Horsford as well a commendation for your service to the community. Thank you, Steve. You're very honored. And I believe Susie Lee is even going to go on the floor and talk about you on the House floor of the U.S. Congress at some point here soon. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. After 53 years, I'm still trying to get it right. Anyway, thank you.
But you do encourage them all to come back, right?
Yeah, please do. Come back 1 year from now.
Yes.
1 year from now, right?
Yes.
Is it going to be on Election Day?
Oh, it is not on Election Day. I will not make that mistake. And hopefully we'll know the results, too, on Election Day. I do want to add, so Steve helped me segue into that. So we are adjusting Outlook next year. So we're only going to do this once a year with quarterly events for our sponsors, just so you know. And we've already got our location, Fontainebleau. We're going to be over there. So I hope to see all of you there. Same time, but it's going to be on Thursday, same day, just different day. So say November 7th, Thursday. And we're really excited that PNC Bank has agreed to be our title sponsor for the event. So please come back, mark that on your calendars. And again, thank you again to all our sponsors, and thank you all for being here.